Abraham began as a man of a single tent, but in the twilight of his life, a secret wife emerged from the silence to populate the future. We all know the story of Isaac, the child of promise, and Ishmael, the son of the wild, the binary of blood that divided the world. But buried in the dusty corners of Genesis is a name that challenges the singular focus of the patriarchal line. Her name is Keturah. She is the ghost in the genealogy, a woman who bore 6 sons to a 100-year-old man whose body, by all biological accounts, should have been a tomb. If the covenant was for Isaac and survival was for Ishmael, what was the purpose of Keturah? We step into the harsh, tea-stained shadows of the ancient East to uncover a matriarch whose existence proves that the legacy of Abraham was never a narrow line, but a multifaceted expansion. In the sacred ink of Genesis 25, she is called a wife, Isha, a woman of standing, joined to the patriarch after the mourning for Sarah had finally ceased. But turn the pages to the first book of Chronicles, 132, and the terminology shifts. There, Midian and his brothers are titled the sons of Keturah, Abraham's concubine, Pilegesh. This is not merely a dispute of ancient linguistics. It is a question of legal status under the codes of the second millennium BCE. According to the laws of Hammurabi, laws 170 to 171, and the Nuzi tablets, the distinction between a primary wife and a concubine dictated the very fabric of inheritance. A Pilegesh provided legitimate offspring, yet her children did not possess a natural claim to the primary estate unless specifically designated by the father. By designating Keturah as both, the text places her in a unique liminal space. She is the partner of his old age, yet her children are destined for the periphery. Abraham was over an adolescent century old when this chapter began. His body had already crossed the threshold of miraculous renewal once before. The divine mandate remained. I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. Isaac was but one nation. Ishmael was another. The arithmetic of the promise demanded more. In the Near Eastern framework, Keturah provided the excess of the blessing, the sons who would carry Abraham's name beyond the borders of the proposed land. She was the vessel for the many nations to finally take breath. Could Keturah have been Hagar all along? This is the assertion found in the Bereshit Rabbah 61:4 and the commentary of Rashi. This tradition posits that Keturah and Hagar were 2 seasons of the same soul. The name Keturah itself is rooted in the Hebrew ketoreth, incense. The sages argue that Hagar, after her exile, tied her axe like a fragrant bundle, living a life of such purity that she was renamed to reflect the scent of the altar. This would mean Abraham reached back into the wilderness of his past and brought the woman once rejected back into a place of honor. This perspective offers a vision of restoration. The woman who once watched her water skin run dry in the desert of Beersheba becomes the wellspring of 6 more lineages. 6 names, etched into the brittle parchment of Genesis 25, carry the weight of this second flowering. Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. These were not mere placeholders. They were the final, surging heartbeat of the expansion. Yet, for these 6, the inheritance would not be the soil of Canaan. Genesis 25:6 notes that Abraham gave them gifts while he yet lived, and sent them eastward, away from Isaac. In the legal context of the time, these gifts served as a settlement in lieu of inheritance, a common practice to prevent domestic strife and ensure the primary heir remained undisputed. Zimran, the firstborn of this new era, is historically linked to the incense routes of the Hejaz. His lineage moved toward the jagged peaks of the Arabian Peninsula, a region that would become the world's lungs, breathing out the heavy, sacred smoke of frankincense and myrrh. Then there is Jokshan, who birthed the merchant giants Sheba and Dedan. These are not just names. They are the gatekeepers of the ancient world's heartbeat. While Isaac inherited the promise of the Spirit, the descendants of Jokshan inherited the mastery of the earth's treasures. They were the masters of the caravan, weaving a web of gold and cinnamon that connected the distant east to the Mediterranean. Of all the names that spilled from Keturah's womb, Midian echoes with a resonance that rivals the chosen line itself. While his brothers moved into the silk and spice of the deep desert, Midian's name became a landmark in the cartography of the soul. For centuries, the Midianites were a people of the fringe, nomads dwelling in the shadows of the Sinai. Yet, when the grand narrative of the Exodus required a sanctuary, Providence did not look to the palaces of Egypt, but to the tents of Keturah's children. Consider Moses. Fleeing Egypt as a man hollowed by fear, he finds refuge among the Midianites. It is Jethro, a priest of Midian, who provides him with bread, a home, and a daughter named Zipporah. The man destined to lead the children of Isaac was sheltered and mentored by the forgotten children of Keturah. It was on Midianite soil, while tending the flocks of a Midianite priest, that Moses wandered toward the burning bush. The ground was holy, not because it was in the promised land, but because it was in the land of Midian. The hospitality of Keturah's lineage provided the cradle for the revelation of the divine name. What of Medan, Ishbak, and Shua? If history is a roar, these three are the skin of the drum, vibrating with an impact we often fail to hear. Consider Shua. His name ripples through time until it clings to a man named Bildad the Shuhite, one of the three companions who sat in the dust with Job. When the great drama of human suffering and divine sovereignty was being played out, a descendant of Keturah stood as a guardian of wisdom. These sons carried a contemplative gravity born far from the tabernacles of Israel, but rooted in the same patriarchal soil. They proved that Abraham's influence was not a locked room, but an echo that traveled into the farthest reaches of the Arabian sands. The story of Keturah does not end in the silence of the desert. It waits within the ink of the prophets. For centuries, these lineages were viewed as the others, those who walked away while the light remained in the tents of Isaac. Yet, the prophet Isaiah specifically names the nations of Keturah as essential participants in the final restoration. Isaiah 66 declares, "The multitude of camels shall cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah. All those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord." Here the scriptural narrative undergoes a tectonic shift. In the era of the patriarchs, these sons were sent away with gifts to the east. Now, in the prophetic vision, they return from the east, bringing those same gifts back to the holy center. The outcasts become the heralds. The sons who were granted the excess of the blessing return to crown the King of Kings. In the grand climax of redemption, God reaches back into the forgotten genealogies of a secondary wife to find his most prized worshippers. This suggests that in the architecture of eternity, no branch of the family tree is ever truly lost. They are merely positioned for a later arrival. Thousands of years after the sons of Keturah vanished into the heat haze, a star ignited in the velvet dark over a stable in Bethlehem. Three figures emerged from the sunrise, their robes heavy with the dust of ancient trade routes, the very roots established by the sons of Zimran and Jokshan. We call them the Magi. Look closer at what they carry: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These were the signatures of a lineage. These were the riches of Sheba and the resins of Midian. In the quiet of that night, an ancient loop began to close. When Abraham sent the sons of Keturah away, the world saw a separation, but God saw a planting. He scattered the children of the fragrance across the desert, allowing them to guard the treasures of the earth until the moment those treasures could be returned to their rightful owner. As these men knelt, they did not come as strangers, but as the long-lost branches of the family tree, recognizing the child who was the fulfillment of the promise their ancestor had once held. Here is where our understanding of the divine economy must be remade. We have often looked at the departure of Keturah's sons as a tragedy, a final sorting of the house of Abraham into the chosen and the rejected. But in the logic of the sanctuary, to be sent is not always to be cast out. If Isaac was the anchor of the covenant, the sons of Keturah were the sails. Isaac had to be isolated. His life was a laboratory of the sacred, a protected enclosure where the revelation of the one true God could be preserved without being diluted. He was the guardian of the seed. But the sons of Keturah were the reserve force of grace, scattered intentionally. While Isaac stayed to guard the well, Keturah's sons were positioned to be the safety net. When Moses needed a priest to teach him the ways of the desert, Midian was there. When Job needed a witness to his integrity, the Shuhite was there. They were the bridge for the world, carrying the fragrance of Abraham's God into territories where the law would not reach for centuries. Their distance was the very thing that allowed them to survive the coming storms of Israel's history, acting as a preserved remnant of the patriarchal faith in the high places of the East. Abraham is often remembered by the two pillars of Sarah's laughter and Hagar's tears. But Keturah is the fulfillment of the multitude. Through her, the many nations ceased to be a metaphor and became a map. She is the bridge between the exclusive promise made to one family and the inclusive blessing meant for the whole earth. Her name, the fragrance, suggests a presence that does not demand to be seen, but insists on being felt. Like the incense she is named for, her legacy rose from the tent of the patriarch and drifted over the borders of Canaan, permeating the spice roots and the wisdom of the East. In the beginning, these lines all sat under the same hide of the patriarch's tent. Abraham's legacy was never a narrow path. It was a flood. Keturah's presence in the text is the final proof that the plan was never to exclude, but to expand until the entire horizon was saturated with the descendants of his house. Every tribe that rose from the Arabian sands was a strand in a tapestry so vast it defies modern national borders. We are invited now to look into the margins of the sacred text, to find the names we have ignored and the stories we have deemed footnotes. For in the silence of those forgotten sons, the most expansive work of history was being prepared. The descendants of Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah are not separate stories. They are a single, ancient family returning to the threshold of the Father who started it all.